Every day in the USA, people find themselves in court.
Yeah, I speak, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Can I stand up? Or can I
Yeah,
speak
if you
right
want to. I'm not sure. I might cut you off. We'll see what you want to say, but let's explain what the deal is.
Can I speak first? You just said that I could speak.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I tend not to plead, sir.
Say that again.
Well, I don't intend on pleading.
Okay. That's fine. That's your absolute right. Okay. You're entitled to have a prelim on the felony case. The misdemeanor drinking driving just goes with it.
Such as I do not acquiesce to acquise jurisdiction.
All right. Acquiesce is what you mean.
There we go, but you know what it means. There we go.
I know what it means, but you don't. We've
Well,
got a
I know
borough
I
growth.
can't pronounce it, but I do know what it means.
Well, it means you don't accept jurisdiction, and you can challenge that when you're sitting in the St. Joe County Jail saying, hey, I own jurisdiction. At any rate, you are correct. You don't have to plead to anything. And if you want a preliminary examination, we'll set it for next week.
Thank you.
And whoever's feeding you this gobbledygook is not a favor.
It's not gobbledygook because you know what it is and I know what it is.
Yeah,
This court does have jurisdiction.
all right. So, all right, sir, we'll set this for prelim.
The other reason why they took action on your license was because of that notice of suspension.
So the officer asks for suspension
Yep,
to the
so,
DMV.
yeah, but you do have a right to file in circuit court and get a restricted.
That's all right. I'll just give me a chauffeur.
There was something really gonna hit this thing. Had a race with a sheep. Just running down.
How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
So you're admitting that you're racing.
So one of the reasons for the affidavit in the search warrant is the vehicle was initially observed traveling 60 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone.
Observe means for them to visually see. That could be inaccurate.
I observed a high rate of speed after right behind the vehicle. I activated my forward-facing radar in moving mode, same direction, and the screen displayed a speed of 60 miles per hour and was accompanied by an audible tone consistent with the speed displayed. The vehicle was on 35-mile-per-hour zone at the time. The white Chevy Malibu then turned east down Hopkins Street, and I attempted to catch up. Once again, activated my radar, which showed a speed of 64 miles per hour and was accompanied by an audible tone consistent with the speed displayed.
And that's whose word? The officer's word? That's mine. I'll take my chance.
Well, they have video.
And I know what the video was showing. Yeah, and I would also, if you could talk to the judge and see, I would like to send that blood work to my own physician. That is in my rights. I have verified because I do not believe I was under 0.251. Thank you.
We have a little time. It's early in the day. Do you want me to come with you and play the video for him?
Would you like to watch the video?
Oh, no. No, thank you.
Why don't we watch it a little bit? Some of it.
I don't think any of it, let's turn the record on. is going to change his mind. And if he wants to, I'll leave something right on the back of a cereal box. And this matter transferred to circuit court as a felony that makes much less aggravation for me, and Judge Stutzman can deal with it.
Thank you for the honor,
Let's call the case. This is file 24300FY, People versus Gregory Cusgard. Mr. Cusgard is here with his lawyer, Rhonda Ives. We were here last week for a preliminary examination conference. Allegation is that the defendant was in the city of Three Rivers on February 19th. He was stopped for motor vehicle violations, charged with operating while intoxicated. He's also, and that's a misdemeanor, he's also charged with resisting and obstructing Officer Michael Kendall from the Three Rivers Police Department, who's present here today, in the course of his arrest and processing in this case, including conduct at the Three Rivers Hospital. Ms. Halleck is here in her role as an assistant prosecuting attorney, and your lawyer, Rhonda Ives, is here. My understanding, Ms. Halleck, is the offer was plead to operating while intoxicated, not even high BAC.
No, it was actually an impaired, Your Honor.
It was offer impaired.
And one attempt resisting obstructing.
Oh, that's right. Well, let's go through that again. Impaired driving is a misdemeanor. It's punishable by up to 93 days in jail and a fine of up to $300. Carries 4 points, and it causes your driver's license to be suspended. Has the blood alcohol level come back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what is it?
I didn't even look. I just got notice today that it was in, but I didn't look because I don't need that. You have it. Came back at a 0.251, Your Honor.
All right, well, that's well over the impaired limit. All right, that's one option for you, Mr. Cusgard. The other option is to have a preliminary examination here today. And we talked about this last week. You're absolutely entitled to a preliminary examination. But let me explain again what that is. You're not going to be found guilty or not guilty at this hearing. It's a hearing just to determine whether there's probable cause to believe that a crime was committed and probable cause that you did it. And it's only on the felony charge of resisting and obstructing. The misdemeanor charge will automatically get bound over with the felony, the drinking driving charge. And the whole thing would be sent to circuit court for further proceedings, trial or otherwise, in circuit court. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
All right. And so what needs to be found here is simply probable cause that you resisted or obstructed Officer Kendall. Do you understand?
Correct.
All right. And as I think you're in the same position you were last week, you wish to have your preliminary examination here today.
Correct.
All right. In which case the prosecutor will revoke the plea offer.
No, Your Honor. We'll keep it open.
Even after the prelim? Well, that's up to you guys. I guess I won't. Then if I was him, I'd have a prelim too. All right. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Rhonda, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Well, let's take our testimony and see what we got. Ms. Halleck?
Thank you, Your Honor. Who'd call Officer Kendall?
Good afternoon, sir. You swear or affirm any testimony you're about to give here will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do, sir.
Thank you. Please have a seat and state your name and spell your first and last name for the recorder.
Officer Michael Kandolf. It's K-A-N-D-O-L-F.
All right, Ms. Halleck.
Officer Kandolf, where are you employed?
Three Rivers Police Department, ma'am.
Okay, and how long have you worked there?
Just over 3 years, ma'am.
Okay, and on February 19th of this year, did you have the occasion to have contact with I guess, was there an incident involving the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the defendant, have you had contact with him before?
Once prior to this, ma'am.
Okay, and Mr. His name. I was thinking of his first name. Do you know his
Custard.
Card?
And what is his first name?
Gregory, ma'am.
Gregory, thank you. And Mr. Custard, is he in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and can you describe him for the court?
He is a African-American male wearing Columbia jacket, khakis, and Nike shoes, sir. Ma'am.
Okay. We just asked the record. Thank you. We would
I have that same jacket. Yours is bigger than mine.
we just asked the record to reflect that the officer has identified the defendant.
It may.
And on February 19th of this year, did you have an occasion to come into contact with the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what happened on that date?
I observed a car traveling southbound on North Main, traveling at what I perceived to be a high rate of speed. I pulled up behind the vehicle and clocked it using moving radar at 60 miles an hour and a 35. I tried to catch up to the vehicle and it turned eastbound on Hoffman. And as I turned the corner, it was the only vehicle around. And I hit it with the radar again. And now it was going 64 and a 25. The vehicle came to a stop at Portage and Hoffman, where I lit it up with my emergency lights and put the spotlight directly on the driver.
Okay. And at what point in time did you at some point turn on an audible signal?
After it proceeded through the intersection. I believed it was going to be stopped. And as I was about to open my door, it proceeded through the intersection.
Okay. And so then you proceeded to follow the vehicle. Yes. And did the vehicle at some point come to a stop?
Well, I skipped this. Did you turn your siren on?
After it went through the intersection at Portage, sir.
Okay.
What time of day or night was this?
I believe it was just past 10 o'clock at night, 2200. I did not review that again.
All right, but it was dark out?
Yes, sir, it was dark.
Okay.
Okay. And you did mention also that you had shined your light on the defendant. Did you make contact with him at that point, eye contact of any type?
I saw him look in his rearview mirror. However, I did not make direct contact with him.
Okay. And after the intersection, when you turned on the sirens, the audible signal, how long until after that, until he stopped?
He went to the intersection at Hoffman and Jefferson, which is M60. He continued, after he made a full stop, he continued eastbound on M60 to Lockport, where he turned up into Lockport, which is the apartment complex. He continued to go all the way back around the apartments until he came to a stop in 2 parking spots right in front of an apartment.
Okay. And after that first stop at that first intersection, you turned on you had your lights on and your audible signal on.
Yes, ma'am.
And he failed to stop.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Once the vehicle did stop, can you explain what happened at that point?
I approached the vehicle and ordered him to show me his hands. He continued to fidget with his phone, trying to call somebody. He was smoking a cigarette at the time. He was ignoring my orders to show me his hands, and I ordered him out of the vehicle, which he had the doors locked and the window up, and he refused to get out of the vehicle.
Okay. How many times did you have to request, or do you recall how many times you asked or ordered?
Multiples. I don't recall how many times exactly.
Okay, that you ordered him to get out of the vehicle?
Multiple times, ma'am.
Okay. And when he failed to follow your commands, what happened then?
He eventually rolled his window down slightly and said something I didn't understand. I was able to reach through, unlock the door, open it up, and I had to take his seatbelt off and then remove him from the vehicle.
Okay. And once he was removed from the vehicle, was it still only you at the scene?
It was me up until I believe Officer Chittister got there just as I was escorting him back to my car.
Okay. And did the defendant offer any explanation to you as to why he did not stop?
No.
And did the defendant make any statements or admissions with regard to resisting?
I don't recall him making any statements about resisting, ma'am.
Okay. With regard to, I guess, his demeanor, his behavior, when he exited his vehicle, what did you observe?
I smelled the odor of intoxicants, and when he was still in the vehicle and looked at me, I could see redness in the eyes, watery eyes, indicating that he may be intoxicated. And at the time, he was making statements while being escorted back to my vehicle. He was making statements about this was his first DUI.
Okay. Okay, I have no further questions.
Are you going to ask questions about what happened at the hospital, or the R&O is simply going to be?
No, Your Honor, I'm not. It's just the R&O is simply going to be the vehicle.
Okay.
I had that discussion with Mr. Marvin after reviewing video, and
all right. Ms. Ives?
Thank you. Where did you go to police academy?
Kellogg Community College up in Battle Creek, ma'am.
And that's where you graduated from police academy from?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have any specified or specific training in DUI cases?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you identify what those are?
SFSTs, which is taught by...
I guess I would object, Your Honor. We're not here on the drinking and driving case. The impaired is a misdemeanor. I've only presented evidence today as far as what would apply to the officers, the charge of resisting obstructing. It's not relevant.
All right. What's your response?
Well, Your Honor, I believe it goes to the probable cause of the actual arrest and why, as we get to why he pulled him out of the car. So I think we need to know his training as a preliminary starting point before I can ask him regarding his rationale for demanding that he get out of the car in the first place.
The stop, Your Honor, was for a speeding violation, had nothing to do with any type of like impaired driving at that point in time.
Well, that's high speed at two neighborhood districts. North Main at that point is all houses, and Hoffman Street all the way along there. 65 and 25 on Hoffman Street drives right at Mr. Robert's house. Maybe he wasn't like that. Anyway, I'll allow the questions. It goes to her attempt to question his reason for the stop. And the reason for the stop results in the resisting. So the objection has some merit, but I'll allow the questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Again, if you could identify your specialized training in DUI areas.
I have training in SFSTs through the academy, just as all officers that I'm aware of do. And you're certified in how to perform SFSTs. And those tests are scientifically proven to show that. And then the rest of the process is generally accepted as you go through the paperwork after you've established your probable cause for it.
And you said you were certified in SFTs. What year was that?
2020, ma'am.
I'm sorry?
2020, ma'am.
2020. And since you graduated, or what year did you graduate from Police Academy?
2020, ma'am.
And since you got out of Police Academy, do you have any other specialized training in DUI cases?
Nothing further than that, ma'am, no.
Okay. What direction were you facing when you first observed Mr. Cuskard's car?
I was facing eastbound.
And which direction was he going?
He was traveling southbound.
Okay, and were you at an intersection or in a parking lot, or
I
where
was
were
in a
you?
parking lot.
Okay, and were you stationary or what were you doing in the parking lot?
I was stationary watching North Main.
And which direction was the defendant going when you first noticed his vehicle?
Southbound.
And what initially struck you about his vehicle when you saw it?
It appeared to be traveling at a high rate of speed compared to all vehicle traffic that I've ever seen on North Main.
Did you see him pass anyone?
He didn't pass anyone, no ma'am. There was no other cars at the time.
Were you able to identify, or did he actually pass you when he went in front of you? Were you able to identify the rate of speed that he was going when he passed you?
Not at that exact moment, no ma'am.
When you pulled behind him, did you notice that there was any weaving in his lane or any traffic violations?
Other than the speed, no ma'am.
How long were you following him before you were able to capture a speed detection in your car?
It was only a few seconds after I pulled out, ma'am. I had to get the radar into the forward-facing mode in the same direction, which is only 2 button pushes on the remote, ma'am.
And what kind of radar or speed detection unit do you use in your car?
I don't know the exact brand, ma'am. Not off the top of my head. I would have to look at that again.
Is there more than one?
We only use one type of radar at the department. I don't think we have any different units in the department.
And how often do you calibrate that speed detection device?
We're not certified to calibrate. We can test it to make sure that the instrument is working to the standard at the beginning of the shift, but we don't calibrate it ourselves. That has to be a technician from the company.
And how often per policy are you supposed to calibrate it?
I'm not aware of that, ma'am.
How often do you
Now, this isn't relevant. This goes to a speeding ticket, and he didn't get a speeding ticket.
Okay, Your Honor. When you initially clocked him on your radar, what did you indicate? What speed was he going?
He was doing 60 is what the radar unit displayed, ma'am.
And was that before you turned on your signal?
Yes, ma'am. That was before I activated lights or signal.
And what was the primary reason that you activated your signal?
Because of speeding.
Okay. And then at that point, that's when you said you went through the intersection?
Yes, ma'am.
And what intersection was that?
No, you've missed a turn. They turned off North Main Street westbound on Hoffman Street.
I apologize.
Or eastbound on Hoffman Street.
So you turned eastbound on Hoffman Street?
Yes, ma'am.
At that point. And to clarify, before you entered onto the roadway following Mr. Cuscard's car, what parking lot were you in?
I was at Berkshire Hathaway.
Okay. And then when you turned eastbound, how far of a distance do you believe you were following Mr. Cuscard's vehicle before you turned on your signal?
I believe I made it to, I was trying to get closer before activating my light. I believe I made it almost to Oak Street before I'm sorry, not Oak Pine.
Okay. And then there was a point in time that you went through an intersection.
Yes, ma'am.
And you thought at some point he was going to pull over.
I believed he had stopped at the stop sign on Hoffman and Portage. I believe he was going to be stopped there. So because I had pulled up behind him with the lights, put the spotlight on him, and I saw him look in his rearview mirror. So I believed he was just stopped. Some people sometimes don't know where to pull off, or if they need to pull off, or just stop where they already are. So I assumed he was just stopped. So I went to open my door, and he continued through the intersection.
At that point, had he made a proper stop at the stop sign?
Yes, ma'am.
Had he been weaving in his lane at all up to that point?
Not that I'd observed.
And your lights were fully engaged when you were at the stop sign?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then he went through and then you continued to engage him and follow him after that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then does he accelerate in speed again? And
he was doing approximately 30 miles an hour from the stop sign to the next stop.
Okay. So there wasn't any more high rates of speed?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And how far from that point, from when he came to the stop sign until he finally stopped?
I haven't measured the distance, but I believe it would be about a half a mile, ma'am.
Okay. But he did stop?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. Did he pull into a parking place properly?
He was just over the line, but he pulled into a parking lot. Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're not done yet. He stopped at the intersection of Jefferson, which is M60. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
And then he continued eastbound, maybe another quarter of a mile to the Riverside Townhouse parking area.
Yes, sir.
Which entrance did he go into?
The Lockport side, sir. So the first drive on the west side.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
At any point in time, did you see Mr. Cuscard's hazard lights on his vehicle?
I don't recall that, ma'am.
How many officers on scene arrived total?
Total, there were 3 of us, ma'am.
And who were the other officers on scene?
It was Officer Chittister and Sergeant Britton.
And who arrived on scene first?
Officer Chittister is on FTO, and Sergeant Britton was his FTO at the time.
Okay, so they
arrived at the same time in the same car.
Why don't you explain what FTO stands for?
Field training officer, ma'am.
When you approached Mr. Cuscard's vehicle, why did you demand that he get out of the vehicle at that point in time?
Because he refused to stop, which is an indicator that something is wrong.
And in your training experience, typically you would walk up to a vehicle and ask for a license, registration, proof of
if they
insurance.
come to a stop, as most people do when you're pulling them over. Yes, ma'am.
But in this case, you did not do that.
No, ma'am.
You just demanded that he get out of the car, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have any conversations with him at all when you were demanding that he get out of the car?
I was ordering him out of the vehicle, and he was doing something on his phone and ignoring me.
Was there physical resistance when you were attempting to retrieve him out of the vehicle?
He didn't pull against me, but he did not help himself get out of the vehicle.
Is it true that Mr. Cuscard started to come out of the vehicle when you first pulled him out of the vehicle, what was the first sign of intoxication that you noticed, or what were the signs of intoxication?
Once I pulled him from the vehicle, the first sign was the odor of intoxicants, ma'am.
Were there any other signs?
While he was making his statements, he said that this was his first DUI, and while he was making those statements, his speech seemed difficult and slurred.
Now, as you were trying to coax or remove him from the car, Mr. Cuscard was able to get out of the car without falling?
He was being assisted out, ma'am.
Okay, but he didn't fall as he got out of the car?
No, ma'am.
He didn't stumble?
Not that I recall, no, ma'am.
At that point, he was able to have a conversation with you?
I wouldn't consider it a conversation, ma'am.
Okay, what do you consider it?
He was making statements.
Was he making statements in answer to your questions?
At that time, I wasn't asking questions, ma'am.
You didn't ask any questions when he got out of the vehicle?
Not while escorting him from his vehicle to the front of my vehicle. I don't recall making any questions towards him, ma'am.
Okay. And he was able to walk without stumbling, tripping, or falling?
He was being escorted by 2 officers at that point who were holding him by his arms.
Okay. Who was the other officer escorting him?
Officer Chipster.
At that point, did you ask him to do any field sobriety testing?
No, ma'am.
Did you give him the opportunity to do any field sobriety testing?
No, ma'am.
And why is that?
Because he kept resisting us. He would not let go of his phone. He would not provide his arms. He would not give us the ability to handcuff him safely. So he had to be placed in handcuffs immediately.
Do you recall a time when his phone dropped?
Your Honor, I would object to this line of questioning.
I'm not sure why, because she just elicited more
I
resistant
know,
instructing
but
on
this
his part.
exceeds the scope of my cross-examination and what
She's
my
not
office-
limited by the scope of your cross-examination.
of my direct.
Of
Her
your
cross-examination is limited by the scope of my direct.
No, it's not, but I'll allow the questions. Thank you.
Do you recall the moment when my client's phone dropped?
I don't believe it dropped, ma'am.
Okay. What do you believe happened?
Sergeant Britton had to come and grab it out of his hand.
Okay. And why did Sergeant Britton grab it out of his hand?
Because he heard us ordering him to let go of the phone, and he did not. And my arms were tied with holding his left arm, and Officer Chittister was holding onto his right arm.
At what point did you decide that he was under arrest?
When he was resisting lawful order, ma'am.
Okay. And that was when you were trying to pull him out of the car?
Yes, ma'am. The audible signal and the lights indicating that he needed to pull off to the side of the road, using the PA on the vehicle to tell him to stop and pull over.
And when you say PA, what does that mean?
That is the PA, the announcement. The speaker on the car has 2 functions. One is the audible signal, which is the siren, and the other function is where I can have a microphone and be using it to make announcements or talk to somebody outside of the vehicle. I used it at least once, I believe twice, to tell the driver of the white car to stop and get off to the side of the road.
And this is why you were en route behind him?
I was behind him for the speeding.
Okay.
Which he was failing to stop for. And then he refused to get out of the vehicle for a lawful order.
I'm trying to identify when you were on your PA, if you were...
while driving behind him.
While driving. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I'm just going to confer with this client for a second. I have no further questions.
Is Halleck anything further?
No.
Ms. Ives, any rebuttal?
No, Your Honor.
Argument, Ms. Halleck?
Maybe the officer step down there.
Yes, thank you.
Your Honor, I believe the testimony here today has demonstrated that the defendant in fact committed at least one count, if not more, of resisting and obstructing against Officer Candoff when he refused to exit his vehicle. He was given lawful commands several times according to the testimony, but yet remained in his vehicle. The testimony here today, although not originally on our complaint, does support at least one count of fleeing and eluding in the third degree. He was given several commands out by way of the officer's audible signal. He indicated that he did use his patrol vehicle to announce and ask the defendant to pull over, that the vehicle did continue to proceed through several different neighborhoods and at a speed of at least 60 miles per hour in a zone where it was marked for 35 miles per hour. And we would ask that Your Honor bind over on those 2 felony counts, fleeing in the third degree, and 1 count of resisting and obstructing. Thank you.
Ms. Ives.
Well, Your Honor, I don't believe that the resisting and obstructing charge has been met with regards to the evidence that's been presented. Clearly, there was, I think the court can find evidence that there possibly was fleeing and eluding in this case, but I do not believe that would warrant a bind over on both counts. Thank you.
Fleeing and eluding comes in several different varieties. There it is. Fleeing and eluding in the third degree is that the defendant, the officer was in uniform in a marked vehicle. The defendant was driving a motor vehicle. The officer ordered the defendant to stop his vehicle. The defendant knew of the order. The defendant refused to obey the order by trying to flee or avoid being caught, and the incident resulted in a collision or some portion of the violation took place in an area where the speed limit was 35 miles per hour or less. We don't actually have any testimony regarding that. Whatever fleeing took place on Hoffman Street from the light, from the stop sign at Portage to, just a minute, to M60 and then down M60 to Lockport parking lot. Part of M60 is 55, and the residential section of Hoffman from North Main to Portage is certainly 25. But I don't remember what the speed limit is from.
Your Honor, between Portage and M60 is 35.
Thank you. Proofs are closed. We can ask to reopen them. The testimony was the speed limit was 25. And I don't know what it was at that point, but I don't believe it's over. It's in the city of Three Rivers, so I don't believe it's over 35. So I guess I will allow it. Are you also going to ask to amend the drinking driving charge to high blood alcohol level?
Yes, Your Honor. We will request that.
That's a misdemeanor, but they should be put on notice.
Right. And I did just get those results in recently, so I had not had time to kind of process that. And I think we will request that. Thank you.
All right. I made a finding that the speed limit was not over 35 miles per hour. knowing that it's in the residential area of Three Rivers. He wasn't going over 35 miles an hour, but it doesn't matter. It matters what the limit is in the area where the refusal to stop was. They're all part and parcel of the same thing. For resisting, so I do find there is sufficient evidence that meets the elements to a standard of probable cause for fleeing, eluding in the third degree. The resisting, obstructing, an officer has different elements. To prove this charge, you must show that the defendant either assaulted, battered, wounded, resisted, obstructed, opposed, or endangered Officer Kendall. Obstruct means the use of threatened use of physical force or a knowing failure to comply with a lawful command. The defendant must have actually resisted by what he said he did, but physical violence is not necessary. Second, the defendant had reason to know or knew that the officer was a police officer. Here he's in a marked patrol car with lights and siren. Third, that the officer gave the defendant a lawful command, was making a lawful arrest, or was otherwise performing a lawful act. This was a traffic stop that turned into arguably a flee and elude, and then he refused to get out of the vehicle. And that meets the standard of probable cause for that charge as well. So the prosecutor can file an amended complaint alleging resisting and obstructing a police officer as count 1, fleeing and eluding in the third degree as count 2, and they have leave to amend the misdemeanor charge operating with a high blood alcohol level. Bond is set in the amount of $1,000. The defendant has posted his bond. He's been present for every proceeding. And matter is bound over to the circuit court for further proceedings on the amended complaint. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, good luck, sir.
I thought you might like this, but you probably won't take it. But the name's right here. I don't know how to really pronounce it, but it brought up the whole Three Rivers. It's old. It's real old. So you might like to read over that. And also, in there, the anomaly happened down here in 1932. Someone from Three Rivers was able to capture 7 moons and 7 suns aligned. That's a very beautiful anomaly that happened here in Three Rivers.
All right, thank you.
You welcome.
So you gave me a bunch of Three Rivers history?
Yep. There you go.
All right, thank you.
I already read over it. Rules, regulations. So,
all right.
So.
Okay. That completes this record, and it completes, as far as I know, our docket for this afternoon. So let me close this out. And that matter will be bound over the circuit court.